There we are, that's Anne Kennedy, John Broom and myself at the London Festival of Architecture exhibition, Local Connections, Borough Boundaries, curated by Anne and myself on behalf of Royal Urban Synthesis Society. The idea for the exhibition was to showcase 30 years of community-led housing in Lewisham to gain further support from the local authority. My role to gather content and start designing the exhibition. It was such a joy to be able to pursue a personal interest while contributing to a worthwhile project. I didn't realise at the time the extent of Walter Siegel's self-built legacy until I had a cup of tea with John, where he gave me a map and a list of key players who would help me build this narrative, one of them being Tim Ashodi of Nubia Way. During the exhibition I was approached by Matthew Ponsford, a journalist writing an article for The Guardian on Nubia Way and the struggles faced by the community there. He wanted me to share some of my research to help him with the article. After working with Matthew, I decided to ask Tim if he'd be interested in me working with him and the Nubia Way residents for my major project. That's down there highlighted in red at the south of Lewisham, with Nubia Way being on the edge of the Whitefoot playing fields. While working as an architectural advisor for the Downham Dividend Society, a CLT recently founded by Tim, at CSM it was the start of Making Week. This is when I decided I wanted to work with green oak. After trying to source some square edge timber from multiple different south of England sawmills, I realised my budget wouldn't stretch that far and decided to pursue alternatives. This led me to Tunbridge, following the discovery of a website called Woodnet, which is a directory of felled timber that people need taking away. Half of the struggle with the timber is the haulage, and people actually have to pay to get rid of it. Through Woodnet, I found a recently felled 300-year-old oak tree. Peter was selling it by the cubic metre, but was keen for me to have some after discovering what it was going to be used for, as long as I shared the output. It was a pleasure meeting Peter, who shared with me stories of life in the Jura and his woodland responsibilities there. The video playing shows me working with the oak. At first my intention was to work solely with hand tools. This was partly because it was the end of term and the workshops were closed, but was also a desire to see how far I could get in the interests of the climate emergency and environmental concerns. An earlier theme I touched upon was the bodily interaction with the material. Since researching Bernard Leach and Shoji Hamada for Unit 1, I discovered a real working relationship between the human and the natural material, a connection of the human body and a product of the earth. This theme only strengthens my relationship with timber. It's not just the ecological benefits that interest me, but the social, economic and health benefits associated as well. Timber doesn't just benefit the user, but is also a pleasure to work with. I've worked with tree surgeons in the past, and for every tree that was felled we planted 10. This is where I first discovered the energy felt while working with this material. The revolving joint there will later inform my proposal. The collection of logs I collected would have seen me right through the year. Just before lockdown, I was in the process of making a beautiful oak site model. The finish I was managing to get from something taken from the log was amazing. While experimenting with these pieces, I also discovered through one of last year's graduates, Sam, a source of unimaginable quantities of felled timber as a result of Crossrail's destruction. I'll come back to this later with the network diagram. The video now shows the point when I realised I needed to use machinery. It took a fair amount of energy and determination to get through that log, and on doing so, I found the fungal decay running right through the entire length. Another connection made while sourcing materials for my biophilic desk was City Wood. I wanted to include City Wood after having discovered them some years earlier, during my studies at the University of East London. I wasn't aware at the time, but it turns out that most, if not all, of the timber in the yard is reclaimed, with the majority being felled timber. Dan has a network of tree surgeons around London who contact him when a tree is cut down. Dan then goes to them with his mobile sawmill and mills the trees, providing he can turn it into workable timber. Now back to the Downham Dividend Society. The dream for the CLT is to construct a series of 5 community-oriented projects around the Whitefoot playing fields that will offer local participation in an effort to create social value and a sense of ownership over the amenities in the area. This is where my proposal comes in. The 5 strands are the idea of the Downham Dividend Society. In order to strengthen participation in these projects, I'm proposing the Maker Verde School of Timber in an effort to facilitate localised paths into employment and negate the need to travel to the city for work. An issue I have been aware of for some time now is the construction skills shortage in the UK and the barriers that stand in the way of people trying to get into the industry. There are plenty of schemes out there working hard to alleviate the shortages, one of them being the Lewisham Construction Hub, part of the Mayor's Construction Academy. Here people can apply for jobs that provide training and qualification to enable them onto the building site. Just to get a Construction Skills Certification Scheme card, the CSCS card, you now need an MVQ that takes about a year of study and costs almost £500. This is the main barrier, and the Mayor's scheme is looking at ways to help applicants gain these. While looking at the Lewisham Hub and the jobs there, I discovered that the majority of jobs advertised were outside of Lewisham, meaning at least an hour's worth of travel. This, now more than ever, is quite off-putting for a would-be labourer. So this diagram shows the programme. At first I wanted to use primary conversion and secondary conversion for the timber. After speaking to Bruce Saunders of Saunders Seasonings from Assemble's Black Horse workshops, I decided to take the sawmill out and just have secondary conversion and some learning facilities. So following further developments, the diagrams here show an ancillary welfare facility building with the sawmill in front of another building which is a drying room or storage area for the felled timber in the area that might not necessarily be conducive to the biodiversity of the woodland. So from here I move on to some interior views of the Maker Verde School of Timber and the lessons that would be taught within the classroom. Here we see a diagram showing the importance of trees within the urban environment. These lessons would be taught in addition to construction skills. And throughout Unit 5 I plan on expanding my network with associations like Trees for Cities and looking more in depth into the value of trees, following recent reports that the CO2 reductions might not be as significant as first thought. So to finish up, here's network and future trajectories page. It shows the path right through from before attending college through UEL and onto UAL. On the right there's a scroll bar with some imagery that shows some of the actors that I've met along the way, and here these areas are all clickable and you can sort of click on the periphery of each of those clusters to zoom in. The big green question mark is kind of symbolic of the unknown future. Where do I go from here? I'd like to pursue my interest in timber and create more networks with forestry associations in order to enable the supply of felled timber for community-led projects.